I was completely stunned by what Dr. Johnson had just told me. I'd only brought Michael in for his regular checkup, and now the doctor was telling me something that shook me to my core. "Mrs. Simmons, you need to leave him. You could be in danger." His words hit like a cold wave. I looked into his serious eyes, and for a moment, I couldn't comprehend it. My mind raced, my heart pounded in my chest. I had no idea how to respond. "What do you mean?" I stammered, trying to hold it together. "I'm not joking," Dr. Johnson insisted. "You need to take action now. It's serious." I barely heard the rest of his words as panic started to take hold. This wasn't the day I had expected. I used to pity Michael for his illness, but now, a whole new wave of emotions was building inside. Never. Confusion, disbelief. "Okay, I understand. I'll do something. Thank you for telling me," I said, my voice shaky, but inside, I was reeling. "My name is Alice Simmons, and I'm 53 years old. For the past 30 years, I've worked as a full-time employee at a major pharmaceutical company. I've seen many colleagues retire, and I'm one of the few left from my generation still holding a steady job. It's a comfortable, familiar place almost like home. The reason I stayed in my job so long, despite my age, is that I'd never been married until 3 years ago. 3 years ago, my department manager, Smith, had made a joking remark, "Alice, are you ever going to get married?" At my age, it could have been seen as harassment, but I wasn't offended. He was a colleague, and we often joked together after all. He was single too. Our mutual bachelorhood had created a bond. "Well, I'm looking," I said, with a laugh. "And you?" "Huh, fair enough. Let's both try our best to find someone." I shrugged off the comment, but little did Smith know, I had already met someone special. Michael. Michael was 5 years older than me, and he had been married before, but his previous marriage had ended in divorce. We met through a marriage consultation office, both of us wanting a partner without the pressures of children. We kept it quiet at first, just the two of us. A few months later, we married quietly. There was no grand wedding, just a simple visit to the city hall to file the paperwork. It felt surprisingly easy, and I was eager for what lay ahead. Michael worked as a salaried employee at a factory, and I made more than he did. He'd been there since high school, and though his job wasn't glamorous, it was steady. I had grown up in an orphanage, and I had always been determined to stand on my own 2 feet, to never rely on anyone else. That's why I kept my job at a pharmaceutical company even after we married. I told Smith about the wedding right away. "Congratulations," he said with a smile, though his expression was a little complicated. Maybe he was lonely, seeing me get married before he did. When I teased him about it, he quickly brushed it off with a "don't be silly." As for me, I was thrilled about starting this new chapter with Michael. For the first time in years, I felt a renewed sense of excitement. My imagination ran wild with dreams of our future together. But as the months passed, things began to shift. Our once harmonious life started to fray. I noticed subtle changes in Michael. He started to seem more distant, more withdrawn. Mornings became a struggle, barely ate his breakfast. His mood seemed off, and he would mix up simple things like salt and ketchup. He wore mismatched socks and space out for hours. It was unlike him. I had always liked that Michael wasn't overly chatty, but now, his silence seemed unnatural. It felt like I was living with a stranger. I wondered if something deeper was wrong, so I took him to a psychosomatic clinic. After a few sessions, the diagnosis came back: depression. I knew a little about depression, but hearing it about my own husband made everything feel like it was crumbling. The doctor advised that the best way to treat depression was to address its root cause. But what was the cause? Michael had been working at the same factory for years. There didn't seem to be any reason for him to suddenly become depressed. He hadn't changed jobs or had any major life events. We kept going back to the clinic, but the treatments didn't seem to work. Michael's condition worsened. On his bad days, he could barely get out of bed. His headaches were unbearable, and he'd often call in sick for work. His appetite dwindled, and he lost weight. Eventually, he had no choice but to take a leave of absence. But things didn't improve. Michael's mental health deteriorated, and he was forced to quit his job altogether. "I'm sorry for all the trouble I've caused you," Michael murmured, guilt evident in his voice. "It's okay," I replied, forcing a smile. "Believe it or not, I actually enjoy working." Michael had been apologizing like this for weeks. Each time his condition worsened, he felt guilty for being unable to contribute, but I just wanted him to get better. I couldn't stand to see him like this. It was heartbreaking. Each day, I left for work, trying not to let my worry show, but there were moments when I couldn't help but fret, especially after he wandered off one day. He couldn't even remember where our house was. I had been terrified, wondering if his depression was starting to blend with early signs of dementia. The thought of it only added to the weight of my stress. "Alice, are you doing okay?" Smith asked one morning, noticing my exhaustion. "It seems like your husband's condition hasn't improved." "No, he's not getting any better," I replied, my voice heavy with defeat. "I see," he said sympathetically. "You should take a break too." He handed me a bottle of energy drink. "Here, take this." I took it gratefully, drinking it on the spot. "Thank you so much," I said, feeling a slight lift in my spirits. "No problem. We're all in this together," Smith said quietly, and I nearly broke down. His words hit me harder than I expected. I had been trying so hard to hold everything together, but the stress had been building without me even realizing it. I had to stay strong for both of us, but I was on the edge of breaking. Over the next 2 years, Michael's condition only worsened. By our 3rd anniversary, there was still no sign of improvement. One morning, as I prepared to leave for work, I noticed something strange. The car, which should have been parked by the entrance, was gone. I blinked, trying to make sense of it. There was no way the car could have disappeared. It had to be here. "Honey, do you know where the car went?" I asked, my voice tinged with anxiety. "I don't know," Michael replied, sounding distant. "I think it was there when I came back yesterday." I remembered now. He had gone out for a walk the day before, something the doctor had recommended for his condition. But if the car had been there when he returned, how could it be missing now? My mind raced with questions. I decided to take the bus and train to work instead, but the unfamiliar route made me late. I told Smith about the missing car, and he frowned. "That's unfortunate. Where could the car have gone? Didn't your husband take it somewhere?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "He hasn't driven in months. It's too dangerous with his condition." Smith seemed to suspect Michael might have something to do with it, but I knew better. Michael's mental state had made him prone to mistakes and confusion. I couldn't believe he'd taken the car out on his own. Later, after work, I reported the missing car to the police. I prayed it would turn up soon, but deep down, I couldn't shake the sense that something wasn't right. And then, on payday, I noticed something even stranger. I went to the bank to withdraw some money and update my bank book, only to find that my balance was zero. We had a joint account as a couple, but the bank book I checked was my personal one. When I checked the joint account as well, the balance was somehow the same as zero. I was baffled, trying to make sense of what had happened. Since Michael had access to the joint account, I assumed he might have withdrawn the money. However, I had never told him about my personal account, and there was no way he could have known the PIN. Yet, all my savings were gone. A chill ran down my spine as I tried to piece together the unexplainable events. When I got home, I immediately confronted Michael. "Have you withdrawn any money from our joint account recently?" "What are you talking about?" he asked, looking confused. "The balance is gone. Do you know anything about it?" Michael's reaction seemed off, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. He was dealing with depression, and I didn't want to put extra stress on him. He paused, staring at the ceiling as if lost in thought, his voice distant. "I have no idea. I've left the management of our household finances to you. I really don't know anything." I looked at him, wondering if he truly didn't know or if his illness had made him forget. Could he have been in such a daze that he would have withdrawn the money? I couldn't be sure. I was thinking about reporting the missing funds to the police, but in my heart, I already knew that neither the stolen car nor the money had been found. Losing the car was a shock, but losing all our money made me feel truly desperate. If only I had parents to turn to during times like this. Maybe I could borrow money, but I had grown up in an orphanage and didn't know anyone who could help. All I had was Michael, and even he was struggling. I felt trapped, overwhelmed by anxiety and loneliness. Just yesterday, I had been advised to change Michael's psychiatric care. The small community practice we had been visiting said there was a limit to what they could do for him. They recommended we visit a general hospital and even gave us a referral letter. Today, we decided to take their advice. We took a taxi to the hospital. Our first time visiting a general facility. I felt a knot in my stomach, nervous about the new place and what it might mean for Michael's treatment. Throughout the ride, Michael remained silent as usual. When we finally arrived, I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, and walked inside. I submitted the referral letter at the reception and waited for Michael's name to be called, as expected in a general hospital. There were many other patients, and I knew it might take some time. After about an hour, Michael's name was finally called, and he went into the consultation room. I sat down with a book to pass the time, but just as Michael entered, a nurse came over and called out to me. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Simmons?" Yes, I am. "The doctor would like to speak with you. Could you please follow me?" "Yes, of course." I thought it was probably just another explanation about Michael's illness, something routine. I followed the nurse, my nerves starting to build as we walked down the hallway. She led me to a different room, not the consultation room, and I stepped inside. "I apologize for calling you in. Please, have a seat over there." My first impression of the doctor was that he seemed humble and kind. He appeared to be about 10 years older than me. With gray hair and a beard, he looked like someone I could trust. "Is this about my husband's condition?" I asked, trying to stay calm. He nodded deeply. I knew it. "Is it quite bad?" I braced myself for whatever he was going to say next. "I'm really sorry to bring this up so suddenly, and I hope I'm not making you uncomfortable, but I need to be straightforward with you." His tone made me tense up. I wasn't prepared for what was coming. "You need to get away from your husband right now," he said, his words taking me completely off guard. The truth is, he was arrested for fraud 13 years ago. I frowned. My mind went blank as I tried to process the shocking revelation. Why was I hearing this from a doctor? I had only brought Michael in for a routine checkup, and now I was being told something that sounded unimaginable. My heart raced, and panic started to cloud my thoughts. While I was conducting his checkup today, something about his face seemed familiar. The doctor continued. His responses made me doubt whether he really has depression. "I've been a psychiatrist for 10 years, and I believe he's not depressed. He's just pretending." I could barely speak. My mind was whirling. I remembered seeing him before. I used to be a surgeon until 10 years ago, and exactly 13 years ago, he was brought in with a deep cut in his right leg. I was the one who treated him. The doctor's gaze was intense. When I saw the large star on his leg today, it all clicked. He's the same patient I treated back then. My stomach dropped. Michael did have a large scar on his right leg, but I had never asked about it, and Michael had never brought it up. I had just assumed it was from some past accident, the coincidence of meeting the doctor who had treated him back then felt unreal. "Back then, he said he got injured during an argument with his wife," the doctor continued. "Later, I found out that the argument was because he had defrauded his ex-wife. He had stolen her designer goods and money." "Stolen?" I gasped, barely able to process the words. He pretended to have dementia." The doctor nodded. "Yes, just like his current situation. He pretends to be ill, lets his wife let her guard down, and then commits fraud. It's truly despicable behavior." The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. I was none. Michael had a criminal past, and I had no idea. I had never thought to check his background. I had been so overjoyed to find a partner at my age that I had ignored everything about his past. If I had parents, maybe they would have looked into it. "Is everything okay?" The doctor's voice broke through my thoughts. There might be danger approaching. It would be best to take action quickly. His serious tone made it clear that this wasn't a joke. I was stunned, barely able to move. But as the gravity of this situation sank in, I knew I had been deceived by Michael for so long. "Well, I understand. Thank you for telling me," I said, though my voice was shaky. As we walked out of the doctor's office together, I tried to keep my composure, but my mind was racing. I had to do something, anything to protect myself and find out the truth. The only thing I could think of was installing surveillance cameras around the house to monitor Michael while I was away. A week later, I began setting up the cameras, knowing that things were about to change drastically. I noticed a watch and bag were missing from their usual spots, so I decided to check the camera footage. What I saw was shocking. The recordings showed Michael leaving the house with both items, and about 2 hours later, he returned with a stack of cash in hand, a smug and suspicious look on his face. He didn't seem like someone suffering from depression at all. At that moment, I was certain Michael had been stealing from me, taking my car and savings. It was hard to believe, but the evidence was undeniable. Michael had lied to me. He had deceived me, stolen my money and valuable items, and acted as if nothing had happened at all while pretending to be a patient. I could no longer forgive him. What had been the point of working so hard and taking care of him, if this was how he repaid me? Of course, a divorce was inevitable. But I wanted more than just separation. I wanted him to face the consequences of his actions. He needed to reflect on what he had done, repay my kindness with atonement, not malice. With a mix of emotions, I went to get the divorce papers and filled them out. The next day, I told Michael I was going out for a bit, and I headed straight to the police station. I had taken a day off from work the previous day for an emergency, and my leave request for today was also approved. I explained to the police about Michael's deceit and the theft, and showed them the recorded footage. The officers were skeptical at first, but they checked with the pawn shop where Michael had sold the stolen items. They also tracked down my missing car, which had been sold as a used vehicle. It was confirmed that Michael had withdrawn money from my account. Worst of all, it turned out that his claimed depression was a lie. As Michael's web of lies unraveled, I felt a mix of relief, sadness, and disbelief. "Michael Simmons has a criminal record. We will obtain a warrant and head to your house," the officer said. I nodded, barely processing what had just happened. Returning home with the police, it was just past 3 p.m. Michael was startled to see me back early from work, especially with the officers behind me. His eyes widened in shock. "What's going on?" he asked, sensing something was off. "I'm here to get a divorce," I said, presenting the divorce papers. Normally, his focus would be on the papers, but his eyes kept darting to the police officers behind me. "Michael Simmons, you're under arrest for fraud," one officer said, showing his badge. Michael took a step back, raising his voice in denial. "What the hell are you talking about? You've been lying to me, haven't you? You weren't really suffering from depression, were you?" I looked at him, heart sinking. "You've been going to the hospital for 2 years, claiming depression, but a doctor at the general hospital told me something different. He treated you for injuries years ago and doubts your current condition. He also said you pretended to have dementia to deceive your ex-wife." "That's just someone talking nonsense," Michael shouted, trying to defend himself. "I'm truly suffering from depression. It's cruel to suddenly abandon me." But the truth was out. His lies had caught up with him, and the police weren't backing down. "Where's the proof you committed fraud?" "You don't have any," Michael continued, trembling. "The evidence is right here," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. "You've deceived me for 3 years, stolen my money and car, and trampled on my kindness. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you have any common sense?" Michael, completely unfazed, tried to shift blame. "Well, I think it's your fault for being deceived. If you hadn't been deceived, none of this would have happened." His words, laced with arrogance, finally broke me. "Do you even hear yourself? All this time, I worked hard to help you get better. I did everything for you, and now you think you can't get away with treating me like this." I was furious. "I'm hiring a lawyer, and I'll be asking for alimony. You better go to the police station, you scumbag." My voice was loud and filled with rage. Even the police officers seemed taken aback by my outburst, but I couldn't hold it in any longer. At that moment, Michael finally lost his nerve. The officer swiftly handcuffed him as he trembled, his head hanging low in defeat. He clicked his tongue in frustration, but it was too late. Watching him being led away, I felt like I was in a dream. The doctor had told me to leave him, but I never imagined it would unfold like this. Now that it was over, I could finally return to my life before marriage. There was relief, but also an overwhelming loneliness. It had taken me over 50 years to find someone to marry, and now I was alone again. 2 months later, Michael and I were officially divorced. The process had been delayed by his arrest, but by the time the papers were finalized, I had come to terms with everything. I didn't know how long his sentence would be, but considering his criminal history, it would likely be severe. I only hoped that he would reflect on his actions and not repeat his mistakes. Marriage had been nothing but an illusion for me, and I sighed deeply as I ate lunch at work one day. My boss, Smith, sat right down next to me with a hot dog from the grocery store. "Is that so?" he asked casually. "I think you'd be fine if you were with me." At first, I almost didn't register his words, but then the meaning sank in. My ears turned hot, and I was left speechless. "Are you serious?" I managed to ask, surprised. "Yeah, I'm always serious," he replied, as smooth as ever. He finished his hot dog, and just as quickly went back to work. I was left stunned, still processing his words. I had never considered a relationship with him before, but I couldn't help but feel a warmth inside. Maybe, after work, I'd ask him out for a meal. Perhaps it was time to start something new.